Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think a lot of you have probably thought about, and that's how to speak English with a really natural accent.
It's a great topic.
Yeah. Whether you're thinking about maybe taking an exam, like the IELTS, or just want to sound a little more, I don't know, effortless when you're speaking English, you're definitely in the right place. We've got some really interesting stuff from our sources that we're going to dig into today.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's not even just about sounding good, which
Mhm.
is, I guess, what people usually think about with an accent. It's more that a natural accent can actually help you communicate better and just feel more confident when you're speaking. Of course, it does take time. It's a process. But if you understand those core elements, the things we're going to be talking about today, it can give you a really good starting point, like a framework for actually improving.
That's a good way to put it. So I guess what we're really trying to do today is break down all those crucial aspects of a natural accent. So all of you listening can actually start to like notice them in your own speech and then apply them to your own pronunciation and fluency. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump right in then. Something that our sources really, really emphasize, and it might seem kind of basic, but they keep coming back to it, is the importance of vowel sounds. Like really mastering those vowel sounds seems to be super important for a natural accent.
Oh, for sure. English has a really wide range of vowel sounds. And what's interesting is that a lot of these distinctions, these subtle differences between the sounds, they just don't exist in other languages. And that's usually where people, learners, they kind of hit a wall because it's not just about recognizing the vowel when you see it written down. It's about hearing those tiny differences and knowing how native speakers actually physically make those sounds. A lot of people, when they're learning a language, they focus so much on grammar and getting the vocabulary right, but it's these vowel nuances, these subtle things that really take you from just being understandable to actually sounding natural. And I think that's what a lot of people are aiming for, that native fluency.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny because, we're talking about long and short vowel sounds. And that seems like, I don't know, almost too simple. It's something you learned in elementary school. But our sources really highlight this as a big area where learners often misunderstand things. So what is it that people often get wrong about these long and short vowel sounds?
Well, the most important thing to remember is that sometimes the only difference between two words is how long you hold that vowel sound. So think about ship and sheep. The only thing that's different is how long you make that I sound versus the E sound. And getting that timing right, it's not just about being clear. It's because native speakers, they do it without even thinking about it. It's just how the language works.
That's a really good point. So let's actually break down some of these specific examples because I think that'll make it really clear for everyone listening. So we've got the long E sound, like in sea or tree, that E sound. So how are we physically making that sound differently from, say, the short E in words like set or bed?
Right. So with the long E, that E sound, you're holding it longer, it's more sustained, and you'll probably feel that your mouth is tensing a little bit more, maybe spreading out a bit wider. Whereas the short E in set, the A sound, it's shorter, more relaxed, and your mouth doesn't really need to open as wide. It's a subtle difference, but if you pay attention to it, you can really feel it in your mouth.
Yeah, I'm trying it right now, and you can totally feel the difference. So then the same principle applies to the I sound, right? Like we've got the long I in ride, which sounds like the word I, and then the short I in, say, sit. What's the trick there?
Exactly. So with ride, it's that full I sound, and it's held for longer. It's more open sound. But then sit has that shorter, more clipped I sound. Again, it comes down to the length and how open or tense your mouth feels when you're making the sound.
Okay, one more that I always trip up on the O sound.
Yeah.
We've got the long O, as in go, which sounds like O, and then that short O, as in dog or hot, which is more like How do you get that one right?
Yeah, that short O can be tricky. It's all about where the sound is coming from. So think about it. For the long O in go, your lips are probably more rounded. But for the short O in dog, the sound is coming more from the back of your mouth is more open, and your lips aren't rounded as much.
Okay, so for everyone listening, the big takeaway here is to really practice those long and short vowel sounds. And what our source really emphasizes is practicing them slowly and really paying attention to how your mouth is shaped and where your tongue is, whether it's higher or lower in your mouth.
Yeah.
It's all about those tiny adjustments, it seems.
Absolutely. It's all about fine-tuning those sounds. And once you've got a good grasp on the individual vowel sounds, then you can start thinking about diphthongs.
Ah, diphthongs. Those are always fun to say. So for those who might not be familiar, diphthongs are basically when two vowel sounds combine within a single syllable, right? Like our source uses the example of coin, where you've got that long O sound blending smoothly into the short I.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like a glide, a smooth transition from one vowel sound to another, all within the same syllable. Think about the word my. You start with that broader ah sound and then move towards the e sound. Or how, you go from ah to oo. And then there's boy, which glides from that short O to E.
So it's not like you're saying two separate vowel sounds, like one after the other. It's about smoothly connecting them, making them flow together as one sound.
Exactly. It should sound like one continuous sound, even though there are two distinct parts to it.
And you know what? Our source gives some really good advice for actually mastering this. It says, record yourself. And then, compare your pronunciation to that of a native speaker. It can help you catch those little things that you might not even be aware of.
Oh, that's such a great tip. I think a lot of people don't realize how helpful it is to actually hear themselves. Because when we're speaking, we're focused on getting the words out, and we might not even realize that we're pronouncing things a little differently than a native speaker would. So recording yourself, it's like having an objective way to hear what you really sound like.
Okay, so we've got a good foundation now with our vowels. Now, our deep dive goes a little deeper into consonant sounds, and specifically something called consonant clusters. And gotta say, that sounds kind of intimidating.
It can seem that way at first, but actually mastering consonant clusters is like a huge step towards having that natural flow in English. And they're everywhere in the language. Basically, a consonant cluster is just when you have two or more consonants together without a vowel sound in between them.
Okay, so we're talking about words like street, plant, storm, all those consonants crammed together. What makes those so tricky, especially for people who aren't native English speakers?
I think often it's because in their native language, those kinds of combinations just don't exist, or maybe they're not as common. So there's a natural tendency to add a tiny vowel sound in there to break up the cluster and make it easier to say. But in natural English speech, those consonant sounds, they're blended together really quickly and smoothly.
Right. And the source even mentions specific words like 20 and splendid, where the consonant, they kind of get mashed together. It says people tend to say 20 instead of 20 and splendid instead of splendid. It's almost like some of the consonant sounds are getting dropped or something.
Yeah, it's not so much about dropping sounds. It's more that the transition between them is super fast. So fast that you almost don't hear it. The sounds are still there, but they're squeezed together in time. The important thing is to not add any extra vowel sounds where they don't belong. It's like one smooth movement of your tongue and your mouth.
So the way to practice this is to first break down those clustered words, like really pronounce each consonant distinctly, but then gradually speed up until it sounds more natural and connected.
Exactly. It's all about building that muscle memory. The more you practice those transitions, the more automatic they'll become, and it'll start to feel more natural.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit now. The source also spends a good chunk of time talking about stress, like how we stress different syllables within words and also different words within sentences. Why is getting the stress right so important for sounding natural?
Well, stress is what gives English its rhythm. It tells the listener which parts of what we're saying are the most important, both within individual words and within the whole sentence. If you put the stress on the wrong syllable or the wrong word, it doesn't just sound unnatural, it can actually make it harder for people to understand you because they're expecting the emphasis to be somewhere else.
Right. And our source uses the examples computer with the stress on the second syllable and important also stressed on the second syllable. I think most people probably know that, but how does getting that wrong actually make it harder to understand what someone's saying?
Well, if you were to say computer or important, emphasizing those first syllables, it would sound strange to a native speaker. They might still be able to figure out what you mean based on the context, but it throws off the natural flow of the language. It can even make a word sound like a completely different word if you stress the wrong syllable.
That's true, yeah. And then it's not just about stressing syllables within words. The stress we put on different words in a sentence can totally change what we mean, right? Like the example they give is, I want a coffee versus I want a coffee. Just emphasizing a different word totally shifts the focus of the sentence.
Absolutely. When you say, I want a coffee, with the emphasis on coffee, you're highlighting the thing you want. But if you say, I want a coffee, stressing want, you're emphasizing the desire itself, how much you want it. It's a subtle difference, but it can change the whole meaning of what you're saying.
So to practice this, the source recommends doing things like reading aloud and trying to intentionally emphasize different words in a sentence, and also just really listening to how native speakers do it, like paying attention to where they naturally put the stress.
Both of those are great tips. It's all about tuning your ear to the natural rhythm of the language and then trying to replicate that in your own speech. Don't just focus on which syllables or words are louder, but also on how that stress affects the whole flow of the sentence.
Okay, so we've talked about the sounds themselves, how we make them, and how we stress them. Now, let's get into something that adds even more, I don't know, personality to spoken English. Intonation and pitch.
Yeah, intonation is super important. It's basically how your voice rises and falls as you speak, and it plays a huge role in conveying meaning and emotion. It's what makes speech sound engaging and natural instead of flat and robotic.
Right, and the source points out that our pitch usually changes depending on the type of sentence we're using. So, for example, with yes-no questions, like, are you coming? Our pitch tends to go up at the end, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty common pattern. That upward inflection at the end signals to the listener that you're asking a question, that you're expecting a yes or no answer.
And then with statements like, I am coming, our pitch usually falls at the end. It's like we're indicating that we're giving information, making a declaration.
Exactly. That falling pitch creates a sense of finality, like you're closing the thought.
But it's really interesting because intonation can do so much more than just tell us what type of sentence it is. Like, the source gives the example of you're going to the store, and just changing the intonation, whether it rises or falls at the end, can actually make it sound like a question, even though the words are the same.
Right. The words themselves haven't changed, but that little shift in your voice at the end can completely change the meaning. It shows how intonation is super important for understanding what the speaker really means, what they're trying to convey.
It's like a secret code almost, right? It's like you're adding an extra layer of meaning on top of the words themselves.
Exactly. And the source mentions that English intonation, it tends to be more varied and like melodic than some other languages. So it encourages us as listeners to really pay attention to that rise and fall of the voice, how it kind of creates a melody.
And it's not just sentences, right? It's like individual words can have a specific pitch too, especially when we're trying to emphasize something. Like if you say, I love this book, and you really raise your pitch on love, it makes that word stand out.
Yeah, it emphasizes that word, it draws the listener's attention to it, and it also conveys how strongly you feel about it.
So the takeaway here seems to be to really become a good listener. Like when you're watching movies or listening to podcasts or whatever, really pay attention not just to what people are saying, but how they're saying it. Pay attention to that intonation, those ups and downs in their voice. And then, of course, record yourself and see if you're capturing those same patterns in your own speech.
Absolutely. It's all about active listening and then consciously imitating what you hear.
Okay, next up, we're getting into the fascinating world of linking and reductions. Basically, how words connect and change in natural speech. This is where things can really start to sound smooth and effortless, wouldn't you say?
For sure. In real-life conversations, native English speakers, they don't usually pronounce each word separately, like with pauses in between. Instead, they blend the sounds together, they link them, and that makes the speech flow more naturally. And then there are reductions, which are the shortened forms of words and phrases that we use all the time.
Right, like the classic example, I want to go becomes I want to go. Or I'm going to go turns into I'm going to go. It's like certain sounds just disappear or morph into something else.
Yeah, it's all about connecting the end sound of one word to the beginning sound of the next word, especially when a word ends with a consonant sound and the next one starts with a vowel, like look at that often becomes look at that, because the K sound blends right into the A.
And the source gives a great example with what do you want, which they say often becomes what I want. That's a pretty extreme example, but it just shows how much words can change in casual speech.
Yeah, that do you sequence is often reduced to that dia sound when people are speaking quickly and informally. It's just a natural way to make the speech flow more easily.
Now let's talk about those reductions. We've all heard them. Going to becomes gonna, want to becomes wanna, got to becomes gotta. It's like a whole set of shortcuts for spoken English.
Exactly. And using them correctly can make your English sound much more natural, much less formal and stiff. It's all about matching the way native speakers actually talk in everyday conversations.
So how do you actually learn these things, these linkings and reductions? I mean, they're not really taught in textbooks, are they?
No, not usually. The best way to learn them is to just listen to native speakers as much as possible. Listen to them in different situations, in movies, in podcasts, on the radio, wherever you can, and really pay attention to how they connect words and shorten phrases.
And the good news is you don't have to try to learn everything at once. The source suggests starting small, like picking a few common phrases and practicing linking and reducing the words in those phrases.
Yeah, start simple and gradually add more as you become more comfortable. Don't try to do too much at once. It's more important to get those basic patterns down first.
Okay, moving right along, we're now getting into the rhythm and pace of English. This is getting into some pretty deep stuff. And the source points out that English has a stress-timed rhythm, which apparently is pretty different from languages that have a syllable-timed rhythm. What does that actually mean, and why does it matter?
Okay, so in a stress-time language like English, the stressed syllables in a sentence, they tend to come at fairly regular intervals, no matter how many unstressed syllables are in between. It's like there's an underlying beat to the language, kind of like a musical beat. But in syllable-time languages, each syllable gets roughly the same amount of time. It's like a different kind of musical timing.
Okay, so we take the example, I like to eat pizza. The stress is on, like, eat in pizza.
Yeah.
And the to is unstressed and spoken really quickly. It's that contrast that gives it that rhythmic feel, right? I've always noticed that some syllables in English seem to disappear while others are held longer. That's the stress timing, isn't it?
Exactly. The important words, the ones that carry the meaning, those are usually stressed and held a bit longer. Those are like your nouns, your main verbs, your adjectives, your adverbs. And then the less important words, like the articles, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, those are often unstressed and spoken quickly, sometimes even with the vowel sounds reduced. It's like creating a hierarchy of importance with your voice.
So it's like you're emphasizing the words that really matter.
Yeah.
You're kind of glossing over the grammatical words that connect them.
That's a great way to put it. It creates a kind of wave-like effect in the speech.
And the source recommends really listening to native speakers, especially in casual conversations, to see if you can hear those stressed words and get a feel for that underlying rhythm.
Definitely. Pay attention to which words stand out in a sentence. You'll usually find that they're the ones that are carrying the main information.
And it also compares sentences like, I'm going to the store and I'm going to the park, and points out that even though the stressed words are different, the overall rhythm of the sentences is quite similar.
That's right. The basic rhythmic pattern stays the same, but the specific words that are stressed change depending on what you're talking about, what information you want to emphasize.
Okay, so now we've got rhythm, and the source also talks about pace. It says that English is often spoken quite quickly in casual conversation, but it's also something that can be adjusted.
Yeah, pace is definitely something you can control. And while native speakers do tend to speak fast in informal settings, clarity is always important. You don't want to speak so fast that people can't understand you.
So the recommendation is to practice reading aloud at a pace that feels comfortable, focusing on those stressed words and letting the unstressed words kind of flow together more quickly.
That's a good way to practice, and the source even suggests using poetry or song lyrics, which can be really helpful because they often have a very clear and strong rhythm. And even using a metronome or some pacing apps can help you develop that internal sense of timing.
Those are great ideas. Okay, we're almost at the end of our deep dive, and the last pieces of the puzzle are natural emphasis and expression. It sounds like this goes beyond just stress and rhythm.
Yeah, emphasis is about highlighting specific words to make them stand out, to make them more important. But expression is about using your voice, your tone, and your inflection to convey emotions and intentions.
Right, so just to recap, we usually emphasize content words, the words that carry the meaning, like always and she's always late. And we don't usually stress function words, the little grammatical words like am in, I'm going to the store.
Right. It's all about directing the listener's attention to the most important parts of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And changing your emphasis can make your speech more interesting and natural. It keeps things from sounding monotonous.
Now, expression is where the emotion comes in. The source talks about how your tone of voice and inflection can communicate things like excitement, surprise, frustration, curiosity. Just think about the question, are you serious? It can sound completely different depending on how you say it.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. If you raise your pitch on serious, it might sound like you're disbelieving or surprised. But if you say it with a flat tone, it might sound like you're doubting or skeptical. It's all about the emotion you put into your voice.
And those pitch changes we were talking about earlier, those also play a big part in expression, right? Like that rising pitch at the end of yes/no questions and the falling pitch at the end of questions, they all add to the overall feeling of what we're saying.
Absolutely. They give the listener clues about what kind of information you're asking for or giving.
So the main takeaway here is to really listen to how native speakers use their voices to express emotions. Pay attention to those subtle changes in pitch and tone, and then try to imitate those patterns. Try to capture the same feelings in your own speech.
Exactly. Practice expressing different emotions with your voice. Think about how you would say, that's amazing, if you were genuinely excited versus if you were just being polite. It makes a big difference.
It's all about making your speech sound authentic, like you're really feeling what you're saying.
Exactly. And that's what makes your accent sound truly natural.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
And to wrap things up, our source really stresses that the key to mastering a natural English accent is ultimately just practice, 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 and also really listening closely to native speakers.
Couldn't agree more. It's an ongoing process of immersing yourself in the language and paying attention to all those little details that make a difference.
They recommend surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, listen to music, read books. And when you're doing those things, don't just focus on the words themselves, but also on the rhythm, the intonation, the expression, all those things we've been talking about.
It's like training your ear and your brain to recognize those patterns so you can start to internalize them and use them in your own speech.
And the source mentions this really cool technique called shadowing, where you listen to a short clip of someone speaking English, and then you try to repeat it exactly as they said it, matching their speed, their intonation, even their emotions. You can start with short clips and then gradually work your way up to longer and more challenging pieces.
Shadowing is a fantastic way to practice because it forces you to really pay attention to those fine details of pronunciation. And of course, recording yourself is always a good idea so you can hear how you're progressing and identify areas where you need to improve.
And then finally, the source reminds us that there's no substitute for actually speaking with native speakers. Whether it's through a language exchange program or just casual conversations, it's the best way to put what you're learning into practice and get feedback from someone who really knows the language. And they really emphasize the importance of practicing every day, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Consistency is key, that's for sure. Even a little bit of practice every day can make a big difference over time.
So just to quickly recap everything we've talked about today, we started with the importance of mastering vowel sounds. Then we moved on to consonant clusters and word stress. Then we talked about intonation and pitch, linking and reductions, rhythm and pace, and finally, natural emphasis and expression. It's been a pretty comprehensive deep dive.
It has been, but it's just a starting point, really. The real learning comes from applying all these things, from actually practicing and experimenting with your own speech.
So our challenge to all of you listening is to start incorporating these techniques into your own English learning journey. Start by paying attention to those long and short vowel sounds. Really listen to the rhythm and intonation patterns of native speakers. And don't be afraid to record yourself speaking and hear how you sound. It's all part of the process.
And remember, it's a journey. Don't get discouraged if you don't sound perfect right away. Just keep practicing, keep listening, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
And here's one final thought to leave you with. Think about how mastering these subtle aspects of pronunciation can not only make your English sound clearer, but can also help you connect more deeply with the language and the culture. It's about more than just sounding good. It's about communicating effectively and authentically. So what aspect of natural English speech are you going to focus on practicing first? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.